This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
I don't really have memories with my dad growing up. I mean, I know he was there. He was, he was like an omnipresent person that was just always around, but I don't have memories of us talking or laughing or playing or doing things together, because his role was very much to be the provider, to go to work, to come home. And it was all in the name of doing that, which is I'm very grateful for, but our relationship was impacted by that. And I know that was survival, and that was him trying to do the best and provide security and stability to his kids and me. But as I grew up and as I got into my 20s, I was like, I really don't know my dad. And so there came a point where, I was having conversation with my mom, and my dad was going through his own transition in life. And I said, I'm going to just take a trip with him and see if he wants to hang out one-on-one. And I was terrified because I had no idea what we were going to talk about. We've only spent a meal alone together, and now we were going to spend days together.
There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our Mom Sense and Dad Sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton. It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode.
According to the National Institute of Mental Health, in any given year, about 20% of U.S. adults experience a mental illness. And this is substantial in immigrant communities due to the stress of acculturation, trauma from leaving their home countries, language barriers, social support, and access to care. As an immigrant myself, my parents moved from India to the suburbs of DC when I was just 2 years old. So straddling 2 cultures really hits home for me. Today, I have the sheer joy of speaking to someone who is not only a thought leader in this field, she's been like a little sister to me. Her name is Sahaj Kaur Kohli. She's a therapist, journalist, advice columnist for the Washington Post, and published author of But What Will People Say with Penguin Life. Sahaj is the founder of Brown Girl Therapy, the first and largest mental health and wellness community organization for children of immigrants. Sahaj, welcome to That's Total Mom Sense.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you.
I have to let the audience know how we met. It was through your sister Chandni. She's one of my dearest, best friends. We met when we were 20, and that was half our lives ago. We both have younger sisters, so you're very much like Monu to me. And Chand and I just kind of evolved through life together. We met our husbands at the same time. We got married a week apart. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding. And I have to say, I still remember bawling during your speech and your slideshow that you made. And like, even seeing you now, it's like your laugh is the exact same. You look more and more like Malanti. Like, it's just, I'm getting all the feels being with you.
I know, we've known each other. You've seen me through it all, so.
Great. It's great. And I couldn't be more proud. I love that you are a beacon of hope for our community and, just immigrants at large. And I just am so grateful to you for creating this space.
Thank you. I mean, I needed it, so that's why I created it.
Yes, yes. For those of you who don't know you personally, like, what are some core memories that just kind of bubble up for you?
I mean, I'm the first in my family to be born in the West. So for me, my entire childhood was navigating diametrically opposing values and norms and expectations of those in my household, in an Indian household, and then outside of the house, socialized in an American household. And so I just have all of my core memories from growing up were not feeling enough, either not American enough, not Indian enough, feeling really pulled between expectations and values between my friends and my parents. And, I think there was a lot of conflict between me and my parents growing up because we just had cultural and generational differences that I now know, I didn't have the language back then, but I now know is something that's really common for children of immigrants and their parents.
Yes, 100%. Growing up, you have stayed true to the values of Sikhi, Simran Sangat Satsang. It's so much more than just wearing a suit and speaking Punjabi. And I want you to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my own journey with religion and my religious identity and my faith, but through all of it, what's been true is service to others, community, goodness, all of these things that my parents really instilled in me that are all rooted in Sikhi. And so taking those values and really incorporating them and integrating them into my life has been really important. And that's a part of the work I do with Brown Girl Therapy, accessibility, service to others, all of these things. And so even though I might be on this like roller coaster ride with my own relationship with Sikhi, the values will always be constant for me.
Yes. And I think that's something that many Gen Zers can relate to. We have to take the good from, our roots and implement them in the ways that are most authentic to us. So you've done that.
Yeah.
You begin your book with how your dad and you took a trip to Maine, a father and daughter trip, which I think is amazing and the most unheard of thing ever coming from a South Asian household. And, you open with how you had to create this time to get to know your dad because we don't know our papas somehow. We haven't really found out, many of us, and I can speak for myself, haven't found out about their lives before us until you really, really probe about, what it was like being the children of parents who had to leave their homes due to partition and all of that. And a lot of them are just memories that they've suppressed over time. So you took this trip and I feel like it's just an awakening of perspective. What incited you to do that?
I don't really have memories with my dad growing up. I mean, I know he was there. He was, he was like an omnipresent person that was just always around, but I don't have memories of us talking or laughing or playing or doing things together because his role was very much to be the provider, to go to work, to come home. And it was all in the name of doing that, which is I'm very grateful for, but our relationship was impacted by that. And I know that was survival and that was him trying to do the best and provide security and stability to his kids and me. But as I grew up and as I got into my 20s, I was like, I really don't know my dad. And so there came a point where, I was having conversation with my mom and my dad was going through his own transition in life. And I said, I'm going to just take a trip with him and see if he wants to hang out one-on-one. And I was terrified because I had no idea what we were going to talk about. We've only spent a meal alone together, and now we were going to spend days together. And it was really eye-opening for me because I've realized that I've always been scared of my dad being silent or his sense of stoicism or how he's always thinking and doesn't really talk all that much. And I've always taken it as like he's judging me or he's not approving of what I'm doing or he isn't listening. And instead, what I've realized through the trip with him is that that's just how his brain works. He's so used to living his life, having to make decisions on his own and being responsible for other people, whether it's his family back home, it's his family here in America. And so he is stoic. He is forward thinking. He is action oriented. He is solution oriented. And that doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It just is a different personality and characteristics that he's had to learn. So taking time to spend time with him, I really got to learn more about him and probe him, right? In so many immigrant families, if you were to ask your parents a question, they might avoid it. They might say, I don't want to talk about that. They might not give you details. But by spending this intimate, intentional time together, I kind of forced him to talk to me. I was like, I want to know more about you. Who are you? Who were you before I was born? Like, what makes you you? And I learned all of these fun, like, random memories, things that he enjoyed, movies he'd go to, anecdotes that he remembers of being silly or being rebelling against his parents. And I just feel like when we learn that our parents are people, we can have a different level of compassion and empathy for them.
There's something to be said about cultivating a strong bond as a daughter with a father. I really want to galvanize those who are listening to do that. Daughters who have a bond with their dad have, better emotional well-being, educational achievement, social skills, and, can actually reach their career aspirations. A study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that girls who have positive relationships with their dads have higher self-esteem, lower rates of depression, have better social skills, and healthier relationships with men in their lives. I wanted to ask you, how can fathers, even at this stage in life, if they have adult daughters, and then especially those in my demo who are raising young girls, how can they cultivate, those connections with their girls?
I love this question so much. And it's something I get asked a lot by adult daughters of immigrant dads. And I think those are two different answers. So if we're talking to dads of adult daughters, I think what I would tell you is to just meet them where they are. I think a lot of adult daughters want to have a relationship, but at this point in life have already learned that maybe they're not going to get it in return, that they're not going to be able to access parts of their dad. And so really it is up to the dad to kind of initiate those kinds of conversations and or really be receptive if your adult daughter is reaching out, whether it's spending time with you, sitting in silence, asking a question. Try to be more receptive to that and engaged in those conversations, because this isn't really time that you get back, especially when daughters get married or have kids or, move away. There's less time for this kind of intentional time. So really trying to be mindful of how you can engage in those moments that you might get with them. And if you're a dad to a young child and you are looking to maybe build a better relationship with your daughter, I really think teaching, being curious and teaching self-reliance is really important, right? For heteronormative relationships, it's really important for dads to model behavior and an attachment that they would want their daughter to find in a future partner. And that's where we learn about attachment, is through our relationship with our parents. And so it's really important to kind of be mindful and do that work yourself to be able to model and have that kind of relationship with your daughter, because they are learning that from you. They are learning how they can show up as a woman or as a woman with a man or as someone who is growing into themselves through that relationship. And so it's really important, I think, especially if you have young kids, to really be mindful of how you're showing up, how you're modeling certain behaviors, and how you're engaging and teaching attachment-related behaviors to your kids.
So when I read your book, immediately from the title, thought of the translation, Lo Kya Kahenge. It's something that, we heard in our household all the time. Even though we're far more woke and we have this you do you culture, we still do fall into habits of people pleasing, comparing. We can thank social media for that. Tell us how we overcome that mindset.
Oh my goodness. When I decided to name my book, But What Will People Say, it really did come from both a collective and community experience of hearing that over and over again, but also a personal one where I was struggling with my mental health, over a decade ago. And my parents did ask, what are people going to think about this? What are people going to say? And that doesn't mean they didn't care about me or want to help me, but I think they were truly, their survival has been rooted in how people perceive them, whether it's the dominant society or just fitting in and belonging with the new society that we're creating in the Sikh community or the Indian community in Virginia. Because of that, there's also this element that we don't talk enough about, where immigrants and immigrant families are reporting back home how they're doing, right? Especially if they come alone, if they don't come with their family. It's almost like we have to make sure that the people abroad, our parents, our grandparents, our family abroad knows that we're doing well and we're successful, which adds another element of why we care so much about what other people are thinking. And then like you social media to it, and we're all just kind of feeding each other these like pristine images of our lives and in comparison with one another and saying, oh, they're doing so well, I should be doing better, or so and so's daughter's doing so well, so my daughter should be doing that too. And it's so easy to get caught up in that. And I think one of the things that we really need to be mindful of is whose definitions of success and achievement are you living by? What does that even mean to you, right? Even interrogating some of these, like the language choices we use. What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be doing well, right? That looks very different depending on the person you ask, but somehow we have like unified that definition for all of us to achieve one thing or to look a certain way or to have a certain lifestyle. And I think that's really where we want to parse out, what does it actually look like for us? And I think it's important to remember information asymmetry, right? When you're on social media, you're only getting what people are choosing to tell you about their lives. When you compare yourself to them, you know more about the negative happening in your life than you do about what's happening in their life. And yet your brain will make a comparison and say, they're automatically doing better than me because I don't see the quote unquote bad in their life. And so just being really mindful and analyzing how your brain is kind of coming to conclusions based on what you're seeing is really important. And then I think finding community is so important, right? It's so easy if you don't feel like you have people who look like you, who are having experiences like you, who are struggling with the same things as you. Of course, you're going to think it's a you problem because you don't know anyone else who's going through those things with you. And that's part of why I built Brown Girl Therapy, because I constantly felt like I was the problem. It was me. I was the one who wasn't doing enough, who wasn't achieving enough, who was struggling too much, who was having too many feelings about things. And then I built this community, and I feel like it's been a balm because I've been able to say, oh, I don't have to worry about comparing myself, but I can sit in this community with people and feel less alone. Therefore, I'm less likely to be mean and self-critical to myself about what I'm going through.
Wow. I love that. And I think, you even challenge us to rewire our thinking, where if we feel a certain way, we can ask, whose values am I trying to abide by? Mine or somebody else's? And I love that check-in, going to do that often now. But yeah, speaking of your community, like I've seen the evolution, and it's been just wonderful to see how it's just grown exponentially. I remember your community, the first one you started, Quarter Life Crisis. I love that it had the quarter on there. It was like, I'm like a sucker for puns and all things witty. And when you were at HuffPo, like I just have seen you grown up, and it's amazing how you've always been this community builder. And you did it then, and then with Brown Girl, you've created this safe space for everyone, for this entire collective. So tell us about how the trajectory happened and how it's kind of morphed into something even greater over time.
Yeah, it is really, when I talk to people like you who've seen me through it all, it's wild. So many people only know me for what I've built in Brown Girl Therapy, but they didn't see all the before. And it doesn't happen in a linear way, right? Getting to where our passion is, where our purpose is, doesn't happen right away. It doesn't happen fast. It doesn't happen in order. It just happens when it's supposed to happen. And that's how my life turned out. I struggled in college. I had always struggled with my mental health in some capacity. The short story of it is I ended up getting physical and emotional distance from my family, from my hometown, in order to kind of figure out who I wanted to be, who I was, without being told who I needed to be and what I needed to do. And I think that space really helped me build a buffer around myself and be able to really lean into what are my values, what is important to me, what is the work I want to do, where do I feel my most passionate. And I was able to get therapy because of that physical and emotional space. And so that was really life-changing for me. And through all of that, I ended up landing a job at HuffPost, as you know. And before that, when I was struggling, writing had always been kind of my creative outlet. And that's where Quarter Life Crisis came from, journaling came from, all of this stuff that was more private, yet a little public, because blogging was just like starting in those days. But when I landed at HuffPost, I really leaned into working on mental health content, on identity-driven content. And I built a whole career out of that. And through that process, I was still in therapy. I was still really passionate about mental health. And when I decided to go back to school at 30 and leave journalism and become a therapist, I was like, going through my own professional and personal identity crises. I was marrying a white American man, first in my family to marry outside of race, religion, and culture. I had just, gone to 4 years of therapy. I was leaving careers, even though I was really successful in my first career. And so I was kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I making these choices? Am I, choosing not to be Indian because I'm marrying an American white guy? Am I making a mistake by leaving this career? And I was having all of these questions and kind of existential identity struggles. And that's where Brown Girl Therapy came from. I was like, there's no way I can possibly be the only one who struggles between these like expectations and norms and values I'm kind of straddling between. And as soon as I started building it, I have a journal entry where I was like, oh, I would love to just have 300 followers by the time I graduate grad school. And I graduated with over 200,000 followers because it just blew up. I just realized that I was building something that did not exist. I was smart about it. I did market research and I was like, look, I don't want to regurgitate all of the amazing things that are already on the internet, but I also know that there's a community that I am desperately seeking that does not exist yet. I just started building it, and it really wasn't, there was no method to my madness. I was just like using my personal story to connect with other people, and it just one thing led to another. And here I am where it's my whole career and I'm a therapist and I'm, building this community, and I have a book coming out on this community and the work I've done. And it's really remarkable. It's really, really remarkable.
It really is. It's a full circle moment. And you were always meant to do this work. If you want to talk about dharma, this is your dharma. You were doing it already. So for second generation immigrants, there's kind of like 4 categories, if you will, that we can kind of put ourselves in. There's aligned and dutiful, resentful and dutiful, redeeming and fulfilling, and separate and fulfilling. If you can explain what that means and how we can kind of classify ourselves, because I know which one I am.
Yeah. So this is something I theorized myself, having written my book and having tried and doing hours and hours and hours of research. There isn't a lot of research on the very precise experiences that we have as children of immigrants, as immigrants. And so I took what I could, and then for the rest of it, I just did a lot of interviews, polls, conversations, and started theorizing things for myself, because I was like, this needs to exist. And I know that this is happening, but there isn't literature around it. And so for these 4 narratives that I've been witnessing in the community, it's really about doing what's expected of us, sometimes, not always, at the expense. So doing what we want, sometimes at the expense of what our family expects of us, and sometimes doing what's expected of us at the expense of what we want. And that's kind of where these 4 fall into. And the outcomes can look different and people can kind of move through them. I know I haven't always been on one path, but the aligned and dutiful narrative is really about doing what is expected of you, but it also aligns with what you want out of your life. And the resentful and dutiful narrative is about doing what's expected of you, but it doesn't align with what you want. And so that leaves you kind of feeling a more fractured sense of self because you're not actually pursuing the thing you want. Mm-hmm. And then we have the redeeming and fulfilling narrative. And this one is about doing the thing you want, and maybe not at first, but your parents and your family get on board with it. And there's kind of it's integrated really well into your family dynamics, but also into what you want and how you want to live your life. And then we have the separate and fulfilling narrative, which is doing the thing you want or making choices based off of what is good for you. And sometimes that causes you to separate from your family because they're not getting on board with that. Some people move through these, and some of these have more drastic measures, like the last one might actually lead to estrangement between family members. Or some people are in the separate and fulfilling narrative and then all of a sudden get into the redeeming and fulfilling narrative because their parents get on board or a family member gets on board. Or if you decide to choose something that is expected of you and it's not necessarily what you want right away, you might learn to love doing that thing or choosing that partner or choosing that career. And so you can move through these, but I find that most of us at any point in our life land on one of these narratives that we are living out right now.
And then this brings me to, how you touched on the model minority myth. There was an interview that you were moderating with Prachi Gupta, who wrote They Called Us Exceptional. And you were brilliant. So is her book and her story, how she articulated it. But you asked all the right questions. And I feel like there are so many children of immigrants who are in that resentful and dutiful category. And, it leads to depression. It leads to feeling othered and unseen. And the fact that you've created this space, and even Prachi sharing her own experience with her brother, you're saving lives. There's so many people that feel like they have no way out. Their path is charted for them. And, it can lead to suicide or estrangement or what have you. And you're saving lives because you're making people feel seen. All of us are beneficiaries in the fact that you've created a community for people who need this.
Yeah. I mean, again, I needed this. I struggled and I felt so alone and isolated, and I know what it's like to be there. I never want to come to my work from a perspective of like, I'm an expert because I just have done this research. I want to be an expert because I've lived through it with people, because I am a community member, because I am a part of this struggle as well, because I'm also learning and growing at the same time as everyone else is. And I think a lot of us in these narratives get stuck and we just feel like, okay, this is the narrative I'm living and there's nothing I can do about it. When in reality, I hope my book provides those tools and those tips and those skills to find that agency you have, even if it's in micro ways. We all have agency to kind of make those micro changes or make decisions for ourselves and to think of things from a new perspective, to be able to live maybe a fuller, more authentic, healthier life.
I mean, I can already see remnants of it with my kids. I have an overachiever, and like, what can I do to keep him feeling encouraged and have fun, rather than like, oh man, I messed up, or like, we didn't win this game, or, kids are really, really hard on themselves. Forget anyone else putting them down. I think, how do we like make sure that they don't get inside their head like that?
It's natural, for kids to want to win, to feel good, but that's the part of it, is really helping them manage the feelings that come up for them. So I've had to have conversations where I even teach language words to my nephews, and I'm like, are you feeling embarrassed because you made that mistake? Are you feeling, and we will talk through it and really process that emotion, because it is emotion management. If you are a sore loser, or you are someone who, and I'm talking about adults too, if you struggle to make mistakes, if you struggle with perfectionism, it's because you struggle to manage the discomfort of emotions that comes up when things don't go the way you wanted them to go. And so a part of that is really teaching them and modeling that behavior. They're not only observing you, but they're also going to learn from you how to deal with those emotions. And so sitting with them in it, telling them it's okay, reminding them that you have felt like that, telling them they can try again, naming the emotions they feel, helping them come up with grounding skills for when they feel that way. Those are things that will help give them the tools to work through those feelings rather than internalize the negativity or the criticism that they might be having.
I want to touch on having high standards in general, because this isn't just a phenomenon that immigrant families have. Like, if you ask any parent, it's not just the straight A's that matter to me, but it's all the A's. And by that, I mean, excelling in academics and the arts and athletics. It's just having a well-rounded child. Anyone, if, you could wave a magic wand, would say, I would love for my kid to have that. And furthermore, it's like, having a really good social circle and, going on to finding a great life partner. Like, you want all those things for your kids.
It's often the parent is projecting something that they might want that they didn't have, or they're not getting, or that they think is a reflection of them as a parent if their kid doesn't do it or get it or excel at something. And so really it's separating those two things. Like, yes, your kid is a part of you and will always be your child and you will always want the best for them. And how are you, maybe what you need or what you want to feel okay about this getting in the way of how you are actually raising your child or what you're expecting of them? Because those are two very different things. When I was struggling with my own mental health struggles, I know my parents felt like it was a reflection on them. I know that they felt like they failed me because I was struggling. And the thing is that they could have worked through that, and it could have led to connection between us and me getting the support I needed when I needed it. But what really happened was that they didn't know how to work through that. So they projected that onto me, went straight into like solution oriented. Let's fix it. Let's brush it under the rug. Let's not deal with the emotions coming up. And that actually caused more problems between us, but also for me when I was struggling. And so it really is a matter of a parent recognizing, of course you want your kid to be happy. Of course you want your kid to excel at things. Of course you want all of these things, but that's also not realistic. And you don't want to think about it from a fixed mindset where this is it. They need to excel now and that's it because they'll never be able to learn or grow. You want to come at it from a growth mindset that says, okay, this is the first time you tried. Maybe this is not where your strength is, or let's think about what you really enjoy or what you like doing or what you're good at. It's about letting them, or how you can learn, right? Learning is hard. Learning means making mistakes. Learning means not getting it right the first time. And if you struggle with that as an adult, as a parent, your kids are going to learn to struggle with that.
Yeah.
You know, there's no perfection here. Being a parent is not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about being mindful. It's about being intentional. And it's about repair if and when there are ruptures in the relationship with your kid, because that's going to happen too. Your kids aren't going to love you 100% all the time. So it's really just about being present.
100%. I completely agree. And I think I see this manifesting a lot. And it's hard to like create an open dialogue around it sometimes, because I feel like parents these days, sometimes you have to hear the harsh truth. Parents need to parent. You have to be present. So if you are hoping that your kid is not a couch potato playing video games all day, and you want them to be like athletic and a star of the basketball team or whatever, are you modeling that? Are you on your phone, or, you know, are just living by like those ideals yourself? Like, I think we have to take a hard look at ourselves sometimes.
You don't expect like a 5-year-old to just know that they should stop, like get off their tablet and like go outside. They're not going to know that. So you have to be present. You have to engage with them, right? They're going to learn from you. Oh, let me draw, or, oh, let me take this notebook, you know, outside and see what I can see, or let me go play outside with my kid, right? Do it with them. That's where the connection, I think, I didn't personally have that growing up. And I know that was because my parents were in survival. They didn't know better. They were parented that way themselves. But we are the second gen parents in a different generation, and parents now, right? Just our generation, where we have more knowledge and more resources and more understanding of what kids might need. And we want to be more engaged, and we have to be engaged in order for them to learn that. It's not going to just, they're not going to just know. Kids don't know what they don't know. We have to teach them these things.
Now, I want to kind of discuss the difference between mental health and mental resilience. And I think it's important to have both in our lives. Mental health is, I feel like, even more important than physical health. You know, I feel like it's mind over matter. Physical ailments are derived from something that might be bubbling up in the mind from some sort of stress. And that's just, you know, my opinion. But it's so important to take care of and be attuned to our mind. But resilience is a little different. And I learned about this first when I was reading Dr. Daniel Amen's book. It's called Raising Mentally Strong Kids. He does a great job, in very similar to how you did the narratives, categorizing how parents are. So there's loving, where you have an empathy and compassion for your kid; hostile, where you punish them, admonish them for their mistakes; firm, when you say something, but you kind of set these clear boundaries; and permissive, where you're like, oh, I'm just going to let my kid make mistakes, or like do their job for them. So loving, hostile, firm, and permissive. You know, the worst combination is hostile and permissive. It's almost like having an absentee parent who's completely uninvolved. And then the second worst, though, is loving and permissive. It's when you are too easygoing, too like, you can do whatever you want. And, you know, we can all think back to like, I feel like high school, when you had the cool parents that let their kids do whatever they want. I feel like they have the hardest time finding their way in the world. And boundaries are necessary to create a certain mental resilience. And, you know, we do live in a world where it's a big, bad world, you know, and kids can't be too fragile. Now, what can you share about creating a certain mental resilience? And, you know, like our parents might have veered on the side of hostile, so it didn't have that. But how do we create a mental resilience in our kids where we're really treading this middle ground? We're taking the good and leaving out the bad.
Oh, that's a good question too. I mean, I definitely feel like my parents were hostile and permissive. I mean, I talk about this in my book where I struggled a lot in college. And I think a part of that was because I had been living under my parents' roof. And I don't blame my parents for any of this, right? I say this in the book. I know they did the best they could at the time. But looking back, I realized that when I got to college and I was able to like be a free bird and like have full autonomy and control over my life and my time management and my lack of discipline and all of these things, I ran wild with it because I didn't have those boundaries. I didn't really learn that discipline. Instead, I was like either told I would be punished for not doing stuff, so I knew I had to do it, or I was just told it's fine when I did things that were like not great. I was never really taught how to like build my own sense of inner self compass, or as you say, resilience, to be able to make decisions for myself, make mistakes, hold myself accountable to my own actions, right? I always kind of had someone who would do it for me. Like, it's kind of funny, but like, even when I was a teenager, my mom would call and make my dentist appointment for me. I never had that sense of accountability where like I had to do things myself. And I think that's pretty normal, and that's an oversimplified example, but it's still an example of like learning to do the thing that you don't really want to do. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah. And so I think when we think about like, how do we find that ground, we are veering away. I mean, research suggests that we are veering away from hostility as a parenting style, as parents are getting more and more mentally and emotionally equipped to know and handle being a parent now and how engaged they want to be and what it looks like and what it requires. That's not to say all parents, but we are learning more about being firm, but also loving. I think sometimes we mistake permissive for loving because we care so much that we're like, it's almost like you overcorrect. I dealt with a parent who was so critical that I don't want to be critical at all of my kid, but that's also not okay either. As you say, I'm not surprised to learn that those are the two kind of most problematic parenting styles. It goes back to repair, and it goes back to modeling, and it goes back to like being engaged. It really is about being engaged with your kid, modeling these behaviors. If you're being a hypocrite, what are you teaching your kid then? You're teaching them to fear you, but not really model your behavior because you're not doing the things you're teaching them to do. And it's also about knowing that they need boundaries. Kids need boundaries. They're not going to, it's literally a part of the developmental process for kids to test their boundaries, to be like, what's going to happen if I knock this thing over? What's going to happen if I try to run into the street? What's going to happen if like, they don't know. They're literally learning. They're little humans who have no frame of reference of what is okay, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is socially acceptable, what is not socially acceptable. And that is where a parent comes in to teach them. And if they struggle to teach them, then that's where the guilt and the shame comes in, because either they learn guilt and shame for not knowing these things or doing things that are not okay because they're not actually being taught these things. And so,
okay, I wanted to touch on your Washington Post column because I love it. It was a question that came up that said, I need closure after a close friend ghosted me. And I feel like in every season of our lives, definitely 30s on up, we become so attuned to who we are and our values, and certain people will fall away. They were meant to, but you're still grieving. So how did you answer that, writer's question?
Yeah, I'll talk about that, but I also want to be mindful that it's not always about ghosting either. I know that that's what this question was about, but as we age, our friendships change. And I think one thing is we're not really taught to be in friendship. There's lots of stuff on romantic relationships, on marriage, on parents, on family dynamics, but there's not really a lot on friendship, especially female friendship, which I think is, its own kind of genre of relationships in itself. And there are two types of friends that we have. We have active friends and we have passive friends. And I think it's really important to kind of discern between the two and let people move through those buckets, because that allows them to kind of evolve and you give them space to kind of live through their own journeys of life. So if you have a friend who has had a kid, right? I'm not going to have the same expectation of my friend who has a newborn as I did before she had a newborn. So it's learning to be like, maybe I can be the one who's more active in this friendship and she can take a more passive role, because it's an equity thing. And as long as I feel like I'm still getting my needs met in some ways, but it's not going to look exactly the same way. So it's giving our friends the chance to grow and evolve as well, rather than holding them to the same standards we've always had of them when maybe we were in our teens or we were in our 20s. If you have been ghosted, though, I mean, that's really painful. It's really painful in any relationship to feel like someone just dropped you. And it's really easy to take that as a you thing and to say, I'm at fault here because they no longer are talking to me. When in reality, if someone ghosts you, first and foremost, that is something happening on their end, a lack of emotional skills to regulate emotions coming up for them, an avoidance of having a hard conversation, which might better your friendship, but instead they can't handle the feeling of having that conversation. So really, it's not a you problem if you are ghosted by someone. It's often them struggling with not being able to manage the emotions coming up for them because they need to either tell you something or were avoiding you or aren't able to really tell you how they feel about the friendship. And that's what we need in healthy friendships. We need to be able to communicate and have hard conversations and ask for what we need and respect other people when they say what they need or what they're going through. And so I think it's important to recognize that we can't force people to be our friends. We can't force people to be in relationships with us. And so often when I get asked about closure in relationships, it's not about forcing someone else to tell us why they didn't talk to us, why they're not talking to us anymore. Instead, if you need to say something, what's the intention behind that? What's the intention behind you wanting to initiate another conversation with them? Let's say you get them in a room and you lock them and they finally tell you why they don't want to be your friend anymore. Are you really going to feel better about that? Or do you feel like, wow, I never got to share that this hurt me, or I never got to share that I really cared about them. I never got to reach out and say, is everything okay? I really miss you, without holding the action to the intention, if that makes sense. So like the intention can be sharing what you need to say, but don't hold it to, I need to say this because I need them to do this in return. Because that's going to leave you feeling probably still really hurt. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you can reach out, but just be really mindful of why you reach out. And then I think, as I said, the one thing that really happens is a sense of self-doubt. It's really easy to feel like it's you, but it takes two people to be in a relationship. I work as a couples therapist now. I work with individuals who have friendship struggles. And one of the biggest things is that, what is your role in the relationship? What are patterns in the relationship that maybe you ignored? And what is the other person's role in the relationship? And I think we have to interrogate all three of those things. What are things that you have been overlooking in how this relationship has been functioning? What has been your role in enabling the way that it's been functioning, even if you don't like it, or enabling a certain dynamic? And what has been the other person's responsibility that they're not taking? And those are the three pieces of how a relationship even works. And so really, really taking time to interrogate that and holding up a mirror, not only to them, but to yourself, is really important. Because if you've been ghosted by someone, oftentimes it's not something led up to it. It's not always out of the blue. And so really being honest with yourself about, was I just hoping that it would never come to this? And is this just an easy out for me to then be upset with them without holding myself accountable to something? Has there been a pattern here that I've been ignoring? And being honest with yourself about things like that.
So you shared in the book this really beautiful quote, we are the sum of the stories we've been told, that we tell ourselves, and what we've lived through. But you encourage us to pick up the pen and write our own story. And you have a really excellent exercise on self-compassion that you included. So can you help us do that? How do we write our own story and make sure we have a really deep connection to self?
So there's exercise in chapter 1 about owning your story and really reflecting on the chapters that you've been living through. And then there's another exercise in the book on self-compassion. Is there one or the other that you...
I mean, I like both. Yeah, I love that you said that you can even just treat each chapter as this is 5 to 10 years, title it. And it's amazing. It's like you're helping us write our own memoirs.
Yeah. So I think I practice as a narrative therapist. And so what that means is my perspective as a therapist when I'm doing work with my clients is about the stories, about our stories. And these are stories that have been written for us. These are stories that we've been told either by dominant, macro system in the systems that we live in. It might be in a cultural system. It might be in our family dynamics. And we are kind of the sum of all of these stories. And oftentimes we don't really interrogate where these stories come from. And that's what I learned the hard way, was that I was trying to stay in a story on a path that was written for me that actually wasn't my story. That wasn't the story I wanted to own or really be in the driver's seat behind. And so in those exercises, I encourage people to think about your past and think about, if you had to bulk some of the years of your past into chapters, what would you call these chapters? And I do this work with my clients who feel like they're in a transition. Well, what's the name of the chapter that you're leaving, and what's the name of the chapter you're going into? How would you title it? What are the main characters in these chapters? And these can be people, these can be parts of your life, these can be work, it can be anything. But I often ask people, who are the main characters in your life right now? And it really kind of puts into perspective of like, what are you living? Who are you living with? What are you living for? And how are you writing the story yourself? And when you look back, it can help you kind of keep in mind or reflect on maybe the stories that you've lived that weren't maybe right for you, that were written for you, that you didn't necessarily want to own. And when you think about your present, you think about the chapter you're in right now, it helps you kind of unpack your agency, where you have control of where you can take the story. And I also encourage people to think about their future story, right? Think about you in 5 years or 10 years. What is she like? What kind of characteristics does she have? What is her life filled with? What are lessons that she's learned? What is this aspirational story that you have for yourself? How can you get there? How can you get there now in the story you're in right now? What are things you can do right now? And I think, and when we think about it in stories, we can think about it in chapters, and it makes it feel less burdensome and less hard and less difficult, because we're always moving through chapters, right? Your chapter can be a page, your chapter can be 3 months, it can be 10 years. You get to kind of decide, all right, I'm ready for a new chapter. I have agency to make a change, to change my mind, to go back, to revisit something, to do something differently. And I think that's what this exercise is all about in the book. Is it's really highlighting where you have that agency and how you can discern between what it is that you want to do and how you can write the story yourself, or if you've been giving that pen to someone else.
And what was this writing process like for you? Because, oh my goodness, you left your heart and soul on those pages. And
I'm terrified of this book coming out.
oh my gosh, I can see that.
I wrote very vulnerably. I wrote very, very vulnerably. It was hard. I mean, I think what I've said to a lot of people is that if this book never got read, which I hope it does, but if it never got read, even the process of writing it was so healing for me. I learned, just the process of interrogating your past stories and interrogating past experiences and revisiting versions of yourself that maybe no longer exist is so healing and liberating and difficult and painful in so many ways. That's what this process was like. I mean, it was 3 years of me just reliving so much of my life and really trying to be honest with myself about my accountability and how my life story has turned out, but also all of the moving pieces and other characters in my story that have impacted the way that my life has gone so far. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, you've read it. It's a very vulnerable book. It's a very honest book. It's a very radical book. Nothing like it exists. And so, yeah, I'm scared and I'm excited.
I'm just so proud. I think, you manifested this. You've always wanted to be a published author, and you are now. And you're just galvanizing an entire community and people to feel seen. I have to share this because this one paragraph really got me tearing up. It was when you acknowledged your nieces and nephews. So you wrote, "To my little ones, Ravar, Azad, Izzet, Ronak, and Nanki." And now you have 2 more, Sam's.
Yeah.
So thank you for being such a source of joy in my life. This book is really for each of you. I hope you never feel alone in your journeys. And I hope you know that Sahaj Bua or Masi will always have a soft place for you to land if and when you need it. You are also wildly curious and brave, and your mere existence has allowed me to heal parts of my own inner child. I'm so grateful to your parents for bringing you into my life, and I cherish each of you always and forever. I'm like choking up reading it right now. I think that's so beautiful. Like, you're helping so many parents, cultivating bonds that are multi-generational.
This book is for the younger generation. It's for the kids and the nephews and the nieces and the little ones who are going to be living through similar yet different experiences than us. And I just want them to know they're not alone. I know what it was like to feel alone. And I just deeply and fiercely love my nephews and nieces and want to be that person for them, the person that I desperately wanted and needed when I was growing up. A soft place to land, but also just someone who can just be, right? Like my oldest nephew calls me on his own and he'll ask for my advice or he'll tell me things before he tells his parents. And I want him to know that he has that. Sometimes our parents are not the first person we can go to because we're scared or because we want them to be proud of us. And so having other parental figures is so important. It's so important to have a community, a village, other people we trust to also be role models for our kids, to be confidants for our kids. And I want to be that person, right? I don't have my own kids right now. I want to be that person.
You are. You definitely are. And now where can we find you and support you and buy your books?
So you can buy my book anywhere you like to buy books. Go to your local library and you can request it there. If it's not at your local bookstore, ask them to put it in stock, please. It helps authors. You can find me on Brown Girl Therapy at Brown Girl Therapy on Instagram. And you can go to my website, sahajkaurkohli.com, and you can see all of the events I'm doing for the book. Also, a lot of community and free resources there for mental health, for finding a therapist, for wellness, and all of the work that I do. So those are kind of the places you can find my work.
Amazing. I can't wait to celebrate with you, and your family's going to be in town. Chandani's coming from London. I'm just so happy to be partaking in this joy in your life, and, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some great takeaways from our conversation. Join my community by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast, wherever you listen, and be sure to rate and review. On socials, my handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and X. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My episode videos are on YouTube and YouTube podcasts with highlights on YouTube Shorts. Write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. My team and I read all your pitches and feedback and are so glad to be in touch. Remember, always trust your mom sense and dad sense. Stay strong, super parents. See you soon.